Hey guys, so you might have seen my previous tier list on the cheap monsters, and the reason why I'm remaking this is because, first of all, like, at the 7-minute mark, I forgot to turn down the music so you can't hear me at all, and also, because, since Monke was added to the game, I wanted to explain him. I know I already did that before, but other people haven't watched that video, so I want to cover that for the people who haven't seen that. And also, I wanted to go into more in-depth explanations on some monsters, specifically ones that you guys weren't sure about. And so, yeah, let's begin. Oh, side note, I won't be covering all the monsters on here just because, it's going to take forever. So we're just going to cover the ones I feel like need explaining. Okay, so for S tier, we have Mighty. And Mighty is an S tier because, buffing monsters in this game is ridiculous. If you can get them to one shot or even two shot, it's just so good. And in my opinion, he's better than Speedy because being able to one or two shot is better than just attacking multiple times. So yeah, that's why I feel like Mighty's better. And I know Hellhound is better than Mighty, but Hellhound is expensive, so we're not going to count him. Okay, so next we have, Speedy. So Speedy can allow monsters to permastall. If you don't know what that means, it means they can stop the enemies from moving completely. And there are some monsters that permastall better than others, but for the most part, Speedy's really good, and he can buff monsters with slow attack or even really fast attack to be just so much better than they already are, and that's why I feel like he deserves to be an S tier. So next we have Slime King, and Slime King is an S tier because, it's pretty obvious. Like, his special is probably one of the best specials in the game, and the fact that it hits the entire map and does damage is just so broken. He just has to be an S tier. He is the most overpowered monster, for any of you guys who are wondering. Alright, so next we have Kevin, and for a while we didn't think Kevin was that good, but now that, we have him, he's a lot better than we thought, because first of all, his damage is the best in the game, and second of all, even though he's not super reliable, he's not as reliable as Slime King, he's still pretty good, because the amount of damage he does, it's just so good, and he's useful in a lot of scenarios. So Kevin is definitely an S tier monster, in my opinion. Alright, so next we have Lightning, and Lightning is an A tier just because his special's good, his attack speed's good, and his damage is also pretty good. So he's really good for, like, the Joint Revenge normal when you're trying to farm for more legendary monsters and stuff like that. So next we have Deathbite, and Deathbite's special is pretty good, but it's a little unreliable. However, he still does damage, unlike Devon, and overall is a pretty solid monster. Okay, so next we have Ashe, and Ashe is pretty good for the most part. He does pretty good damage, and his special permastalls only a few enemies, but permastalling is permastalling, so keep that in mind. And even though his range isn't that good, he still has to be at least A tier in my opinion. Not quite S tier, but he is really good. Okay, so we're gonna skip to B tier, and in B tier we have Frostbite. In my opinion, Frostbite is worse than Slime King just because freezing a few enemies for 4 seconds isn't that good compared to doing 500% damage. Also, since it's a beam attack, it's not going to happen that frequently, so it's pretty unreliable, and overall, I'd say just use Puffy instead. Okay, so next we have Monke, and Monke is not that good, I'm going to be honest, but the only thing that's redeeming about him is that if you put him with, like, Speedy and Mighty, then, he can solo pretty well. A little better than Infernus, in my opinion, but only slightly better. He's not a legendary anymore. He's a special. I haven't changed it because making him a special monster doesn't like reduce his damage or anything like that. His stats are still the same, so I've just kept him as a legendary. So, but even as a special monster, I don't know. I guess as a special he's fine, but like, he's still not like great or anything. So next we have Infernus, and Infernus is pretty good at soloing. He's not as good as Monke, but he can solo decently, I guess. I don't know. His special is really the best thing about him. If you pair him with Speedy, he becomes even better. And overall, he's pretty solid. Alright, so next we're moving into C tier, and this is probably one of the most controversial sections other than D tier. And Stacky is in C because the problem with Stacky is that his damage actually isn't that good. And since they made him attack very fast, they lowered his damage even more. He's still good, but I mean, you know, past the beginning phases of the game, you're not going to use him, so that's why he's only in C. I guess we'll talk about Chili also. So Chili, the reason why he's in C is because his special does like an area of effect, which freezes for 3 seconds, which in my opinion is better than Frostbite's special. But the thing is, since he's an epic monster, his damage isn't going to be as high, and he only does single target damage. Although I think Frostbite also does single target damage. Also, we're going to talk about Spiky. So Spiky is only up there really just because the special is somewhat useful. It reduces the enemy's, I think, what is it, defenses by 50%, which basically means you're going to be doing extra damage, which is always nice. So next we have D tier, and this was the most controversial section. So we're going to skip to Sparky, and Sparky is in D tier, not because he's bad, but because he's just not as good as the monsters above. I could see an argument for him being in C tier, however, since he's a common monster, his damage is not good. His special is the best thing about him, but we're not ranking these monsters based on which special is the best and which stuns the longest. That is part of how I did this, you know, how good their specials are, but that's not everything that a monster has to them. Just because they have a good special doesn't mean they're really good, guys. If you want to put him in C tier, fine, but I just don't feel like he's as good as the monsters in C tier. So next we're going to talk about Rudolph, and Rudolph is the second special cheap monster on this tier list. He used to be the only cheap monster, special monster I mean, but then they added Monke to the game, so now he is he's drastically outclassed by Monke in terms of being a special monster, and his damage is so bad it's like not even funny, and his special basically does nothing. He's kind of a joke, honestly. Don't use Rudolph. I mean, maybe if you're a beginner player, sure, but like past the beginning of the game, there's no point in using him. Alright, so next we have Teddy, and I really don't like this character just because they have a very slow attack speed and their damage isn't like, the damage is good, but I mean, the very slow attack speed I feel like is what holds him back. Although his special is better than I thought because it actually hits enemies behind him and it's in a pretty wide area. So that's why he's in D. And I used to actually think Yeti was better just because his special seemed better to me. But now that I think about it, freezing enemies in place for 2 seconds is not that good. And then also in D tier, we have Evolved Slimey. That's right, not just Slimy, it's Evolved Slimey. There is a difference, and Evolved Slimey basically does double the damage of Slimy, and double damage is pretty good, but I don't feel like doing double damage is enough to put him in C tier, but it's enough to get him out of like E, for example. Alright, so moving on to E tier, we have Devon, and I know a lot of people think Devon is the worst monster in the game. The reason why I haven't put him in hot garbage is just because he does have a few uses, especially if you can't do enough damage to like a, not necessarily boss, but just like there are a few enemies that are annoying you. Like maybe you can put him towards the back or something. I mean, honestly, there are monsters that do a better job than him, but it does have a few uses, so I mean, that's really the only thing that saves him. And I guess we'll talk about Sluggy. So Sluggy, for me, the biggest problem about him is that he doesn't attack. That's also a big problem with Devon, is that he doesn't attack. But the thing with Sluggy is that slowing down enemies just, there's not really, why would you need to slow them down? I mean, they're not moving like that fast, and you know, it's not going to happen that frequently, so I don't know why you'd want to sacrifice, you know, a monster that does damage and stuns for a monster that just slows enemies down by like 50%. And just don't use Sluggy, guys. So next, we're also going to talk about Fury, and Fury, I used to think was better than Teddy, and I guess he is in a few ways just because he attacks faster, but Teddy does more damage and it happens in a wider area, or it happens in the same area, I think, but he stuns for 3 seconds, which makes him slightly better than Fury in a few ways. Right, and then we have Hot Garbage. So these monsters, in my opinion, are the worst in the game, and you should not be using them past the beginning of the game. So Ryami, I feel like, is pretty self-explanatory. Basically, he does like the lowest damage out of any monster that isn't, well, 0. And also, a special happens, you know, it doesn't happen frequently, like, at all. And his range is pretty small. Plus, even if you get him to use a special, it's not gonna like last that long. And it's reducing the enemy's defense is fine, right? You're doing more damage, but I mean, it's not worth sacrificing a monster. It's not worth sacrificing a monster just to put Ryami there, because he's going to be doing less damage, and overall, he's just not worth it. So next we have Rocky, and I know some people felt like he should be higher, but I just couldn't find a place for him. I mean, I guess he could be in low E tier. Like, is it even worth fighting at that point? I don't know. But Rocky is really bad just because his attack speed is super slow. His damage is okay, but his DPS isn't good. There are a lot better monsters out there, and overall, I really don't like him. You know, his special is so unreliable. He's never going to be using his special, by the way. Enemies are going to kill them before he even hits them, and you're gonna have to wait for that special to happen. It's not like he's gonna use it on every enemy, for example. Even if he did, it's like it stuns for 2 seconds. Like, what's the point? There's no reason to use him, really. Just use any monster, like, above, like, this is why he's not an E tier, in my opinion. It's because look at all the monsters above him. They're, like, drastically better than him. Like, for example, Fury, he does basically the same thing. He does slightly less damage, I'll give you that, but doing like 10 more damage, because you're not going to rank this guy to level 400, doing like 10 more damage is not worth it. Do not use Rocky instead of Fury, for example. You would never want to do that, because first of all, Fury attacks fast, and his special is going to happen a lot more frequently, and it's going to affect an area, it's going to affect like a huge area around him, while Rocky is just going to affect this tiny, pathetic area for 2 seconds every a million years, and he's gonna do like 10 more damage than Fury, but like, I mean, does it matter? Fury's still gonna be attacking faster, he's still gonna be hitting a lot more enemies, he's still gonna be pounding everyone. I mean, it's just, don't use Rocky, alright? He's so bad. I don't understand why people think he's better than he is. I get it, his damage is like comparable to some legendaries at level 400, but you would not level this guy to 400. There's no point. Don't do that. Don't be whatever. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this tier list, and if you did, drop a like. I wasn't planning on making this video originally just because I thought my tier list was fine how it was, but then I looked at the video and you couldn't hear me for some of it, especially, like I said, at the 7-minute mark. I just forgot to turn down the music, which is pretty embarrassing. So yeah, I'll see you guys in the next one.